We're back here on the platform, and Rupert Pinder, an economist, is our guest on the program today. And Mr. Pinder, value-added tax is still pretty much the subject of discussion throughout the economy of the Bahamas. There are a good number of people who believe that this is not the time. There's a coalition that has been formed to discourage or dissuade the government from putting it in place. I spoke with, as I said, Mr. Sarkis Ismailian the other day. He is of the view that if it is introduced, value-added tax, it shouldn't be 15%. It should be much lower than 15% because it would have a negative impact on the tourism industry. You agree?
Well, one of the things, and again, while I know generally in terms of the value-added tax, I don't know in terms of some of the intricacies, but what I seem to remember, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're toying around the idea, I think of some 10% for the tourism sector, if I'm not mistaken. But there are some sectors I think they look in terms of some concessions. But one of the things that I do want to point out here is this, is that I think we have to be careful in introducing value-added tax. While persons may have very strong arguments to say, well, while this sector should have a lower value-added tax compared to another sector, or this category of economic activities should be exempt from VAT, etc., the experts are saying, I think rightly so, that it's better to start with a wider net and then over time reduce. Because what happens here is this, is that, for example, let's just say that if you start, let's say hypothetically, with 9%, I'm just throwing out some numbers here, right? And you find that it's not adequate. It is very difficult for you now to come back and introduce a higher rate.
Well, you shouldn't start with 15%.
Right, right. So in other words, the argument has always been that if you narrow in terms of the number of sectors that are exempt, etc., if you narrow in terms of the number of concessions at the beginning, it's easier over time to make the concession. In other words, if I say to you 15%, and then over time I find that, hey, look, that perhaps we can get more activity by way of a lower rate, it's easy for me to come back to say, well, okay, well, your rate is no longer 15%, but now 12%, 11%, etc. You know, that is a much easier case than to say to you, well, your rate is now going from 12 to 15%. And Owen Arthur, he gave an address in Grand Bahama a few months ago, and you know, his address I think is worth reading because that's one of the points that he, that he made. That
who's this?
Owen Arthur, the
former Prime Minister
of Barbados, who had made the case that it's easier to limit the number of concessions and then over time introduce the concessions.
Let me make this point. There's been, in my opinion, there's been a great deal of misinformation about VAT. On one side, on the other side, there hasn't been enough information. And as a result of this being chasm between misinformation and not enough information, there's a lack of understanding of what VAT is all about and what it's supposed to do.
Yes, the government has been very negligent in educating the public on VAT.
On the issue.
And you're talking about July 1 for introductory of it. You're talking about less than 4 months. Now a whole lot of people do not know what VAT is and how the government intends to go about it. Certainly the government is not, apparently their minds are not made up on what the percentage is going to be.
Exactly. That's another issue. It's not going to be any 15%.
Let's say what it is then.
15%. So I hear all the retailers talking about it's not going to be 15%.
But you're causing confusion
yes.
by not allowing people.
And then secondly, right, they're not mentioning the fact that people are going to get exemptions. The duty rate is going to be lowered. It's not going to be 15% plus 85% on cars existing duty. That's nonsense.
Well, in all...
they're lowering the duty on a number of
and there are going to be certain areas of the economy that are going to be exempt from VAT, right? People who make $100,000 or less will pay no VAT. You have
entities,
entities, not people, but businesses.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, like you said, there's been misinformation and not enough information.
Well,
And you got to confuse public.
And again, you know, I'm not here, you know,
To defend either side.
No. Yeah, because I mean that's, you know, that's for the Ministry of Finance to deal with. But what I can tell you in all fairness is that the forums that I've attended, right, the Ministry of Finance officials, in my view, have made it clear that, you know, that in introducing the VAT, that there will be the reduction in terms of the customs duties.
Yes.
So I mean, to me, that, you know, that has always been made clear, right? So.
Boy. Well, Mr. Pinder, in addition to that, or introducing new taxes, there are some people who suggest that we should have a payroll tax, that it is cleaner and easier to administer, a payroll tax. But that is another...
Yeah, but that only captures people who work in.
And working in the formal sector.
Yes.
So, you know, I hear people talk about payroll tax. What percentage of the population does that cover?
So the 30,000 people who are unemployed,
they pay no taxes.
They will pay no taxes.
And not to mention the persons working in the informal sector will not be captured by that as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very, very narrow base. But if you know, if you want me to, you know, there's some other things I think that we, you know, that we can mention, because I think it's.
But I think your question, your answer, was the best answer. What is the alternative? I hear everybody talk about what shouldn't be. What is the alternative? We have a problem in the country. The country is living beyond its means. How are you going to rectify that?
No,
that's the question.
You're absolutely right, because when you look in terms of one of the things that we do know is that the $500 million fiscal deficit over a number of years is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
You have to close the gap.
Exactly.
Right, because the alternative, you see, if we don't close the gap, we put that peg in jeopardy. And I would just leave that like that. I mean, we would put that peg in jeopardy.
No, you know what will happen? The IMF will come in and they will tell us what they told Barbados. Barbados had to lay off 3,500 public officers. But do you know what disruption that means in the Barbadian economy?
But
you multiply it by 4 or 5 per household.
But what I will say is that, I mean, certainly in terms of...
That's what happened.
You know, in terms of the...
So when you talk about Owen Arthur and them, I don't listen to Owen Arthur and them, because they can't run their own affairs.
Mr. Pinder, in addition to that, shouldn't we be about stimulating the economy in a good many ways? And I know Mr. Eneas...
No, that's the secret.
Yes. Mr. Eneas is involved in a major agricultural project now to supplement what we are now producing, to reduce the imports that we are now importing. But how do we stimulate the economy? Certainly the government of the Bahamas can be more proactive in stimulating this economy. We can do it organically. Yes?
Well, one of the things here is that the government provides the incentive, but really the private sector is really the engine. It's really what drives the economy. The government is still to provide. For example, there are a number of incentive legislation, that already exists on the books. The question is, I mean, for example, the other day I looked through it. I mean, there's a laundry list of various incentives that are already in place. The question is, why is it that the private sector is not taking advantage?
The problem we have in our country is that we have not transformed our economy. Jones, you can remember one time when in the U.S. economy, they would say how Ford goes and how the U.S. goes. You hear that anymore?
No.
It is a computer industry that is driving employment because they've transformed the economy. One time ago, Coca-Cola was the world's #1 brand. You know what the #1 brand of the world is now? Google. Right? We've been on the same economic track for 60-odd years. And you expect any difference?
We've reached the end of our program, Mr. Eneas, and on that question, we bring the program to a close. And Mr. Pinder, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
That's a good question, Eneas. We'll pick that up in another program. Thank you very much for being here today, and You came here at very short notice. You're a great
You've
man.
done very well.
Thank you so very
We
much.
got to bring it back.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think you
Made some, yeah.
oh yeah, no, you're a good economist.
Yeah.
And we would do well to have you on often so that you can educate our public on various economic issues.
You should invite him on the next round table.
Thank you. Thank you, Guthrie. Thank you very much for watching and listening to our program. Good evening, everyone.